All right. Hi, guys. My name is Mackenzie Lacey. I am a co-founder of the Young Greens of Ohio. And this is our Women in Green Politics live stream. First, we have Jan Logie. She is the Member of Parliament of the Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Would you like to introduce yourself, Jan?
Which is hello from New Zealand, and we're earlier in the day, so good evening, everyone. I've been a Green Party MP for 11 years now, and in the party for quite a lot longer before that. And mostly my working life has been in women's organisations and young people's organisations. Yeah, and my pronouns are she, her.
Awesome, thank you. Next we have Saleem from the Green Party of Pakistan. Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so very much, Mackenzie. Hello, everyone. I'm Saleem from Pakistan Green Party. I'm co-chairperson of Pakistan Green Party. And I'm also deputy convener of Asia Pacific Green Federation. And Pakistan Green Party is going to first time going to contest local government election. And I'm the only female candidate for general member. So let's hope for the best. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Next is Anita Rios, founding member of the Ohio Green Party. Anita, please introduce yourself.
Okay, yes, my name is Anita Rios, and I live in Toledo, Ohio. I've been a Green for about 22 years, and I've run for office several times. In 2014, I ran for governor of Ohio, and although I did not win, we did get party status through that run. We did get enough votes to maintain party status for the Green Party for 4 years, which enabled Jill Stein to be on the ballot in Ohio. And I'm very proud of the fact that we are the only minor political party that has ever been able to do that. So.
Thank you so much. As you can see, we have a great panel of guests today. So I'm going to start off with my first question. What are some of the issues women face today? Erum, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Some issues women face today, according to me, that the lack of women in positions of power. The main problem is continued lack of women in positions of power. If we see in corporate boardrooms, courts and political leadership, we find the lack of women in senior positions. And patriarchy, obviously. The biggest challenge women face in patriarchy, regardless of women's experience, education, or abilities, the patriarchal nature of fosters the perception that women are less qualified and less competent than men. What patriarchy has done is convince people that a strong and intelligent women is the representative of problems. And even the media coverage of women politicians portray their fashions and looks only, although in Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, in India, Indira Gandhi, in Bangladesh, Khalida Zia and Sheikh Hasina Wajid have maintained the highest office of leadership. And another problem women face, access to equal opportunity. Unfortunately, even with education, women still lack equal access to opportunity. But Pakistan Green Party is working on gender equality and ensuring, at least in our party, for every woman and girl a possibility to lead life to her fullest potential. If Pakistan Green Party comes into power, we will make sure that every woman gets equal opportunity according to her ability. And another issue, career and motherhood. The biggest challenge facing working women is navigating career opportunities while maximizing motherhood. The women must be enabled to re-enter the workforce where she left off after the period of pregnancy, increasing rates of maternal mortality. One of the greatest challenges women throughout the world face today are increasing rates of maternal mortality. According to the World Health Organization, 830 women die every day from preventable causes relating to pregnancy. These statistics are even more staggering in developing countries. There are more, but I will stop here. Thank you so very much.
Yes,
Lack of
thank
time.
you. Anita, what are some of the issues women face today?
Okay, so I think in the United States, I hope you do not hear my dog in the background, but in the United States, which is a very wealthy country, many of the issues that Erum just mentioned are still plaguing us here as well. And I would say that poverty is still a significant issue for women in the United States. We still make less money than men, even with the same education and doing the same tasks. So there's definitely that. But I think also, if you look at the statistics of women in power, women in our Congress and women in higher positions in office here in the United States, we are very behind with respect to that. And that shows up in the types of legislation that are brought forward and the emphasis that is placed on various issues that are not family friendly, that are not community friendly. And when we look at, for instance, the issues of poverty, and we look at what happens to women in say, for instance, in Social Security, and I'm mentioning that because I'm on Social Security, but if you take time and you're a stay-at-home mom, you get no Social Security credit for that whatsoever. And you know, women still in the United States end up having to rely on their husband's Social Security if they are lucky enough to have that. And so we have a very unequal, we continue to have a very unequal society, because we know that access to finances that gives anybody access to power. And so I would say that is a huge issue. But I would also point to the fact, as Erum mentioned, of mortality in childbirth. The United States is way behind with respect to that. And in particular for African-American women. Here in Ohio, African-American women are 3 or 4 times as likely to die in childbirth as white women. And again, that's partially due to financial issues, but it's also partially due to discrimination. So those are some of the issues that I see facing women. But I think that also there's the deeper issue of patriarchy that permeates so much of our society, that tries to put us into cubicles where we do not fit. It does not benefit anybody in society to be treated as lesser. We lose out as a society by not allowing all of our members to reach their full potential. And that is what patriarchy does to women and girls in all societies.
Yep, I agree. Jan, what are some of the issues that women face today?
So if I speak about the country I'm from, Aotearoa, New Zealand, I think there's a lot of similarity. I guess these are universal, but to different degrees and different expressions. So we have a female Prime Minister, quite a young woman, Jacinda Ardern. Almost half of our parliament is made up of women. It's the gayest parliament in the world. We have designated seats for Indigenous people in our parliament, and the ethnic diversity is improving. And we've got quite strong traditions. Like, we were the first country in the world where women fought for many years and achieved the vote. But there are layers of discrimination that are still really embedded. And I think there are times where we rest on that history and I guess the presentation of equality, and ignore some of the real dynamics of patriarchy. So some of the examples would be around gender-based violence is deeply prevalent in our society, where I think we have our death rates per capita twice what they are in our neighbouring country and the UK. And Canada. So that is very strongly embedded, as is economic exploitation, and that is the gender pay gap, it still exists, but is very, and we spoke about that in a kind of a generic way for a long time, until probably the last 5 years, where we started looking at how is this same for all women? And actually white women, the gap's not so large, it's still unacceptable and unjustifiable, but it is significant for women of color in our country and disabled women. So like acknowledging those differences for women and how that's playing out is really significant. I also would refer to and pick up that point around particularly sole parents. I think we don't have a great health system, and that's come through recent discussions in our parliament about trying to get medical cover or insurance cover for birth injuries, which were not covered by our national scheme. And the stories that have come through of women living their entire lives. Are hearing from a 70-year-old woman who had been living with this birth injury. She had no idea it was treatable because there's just this silence around our bodies and our pain and just an expectation that we live with that. So we're trying to grapple with that. And I also I acknowledge that we've decriminalized abortion in our country, and that's a huge step for us, but we still have inequity, particularly urban, rural, high income, low income communities with access to sexual and reproductive health rights. And I bring that up in particularly in solidarity for those of you in the States at the moment and that struggle and recognizing that. And just particularly wanting to, finally, there's so much, but unpaid work, and particularly the devaluing of traditional women's work, which I think is a counterpoint to capitalism, because it's about traditional women's work is traditionally about caring, human relationships, and the connection to the environment, things that make our world better, as opposed to like soulless and soul destroying. So yeah.
Awesome. My next question is touching base on what Anita mentioned earlier. It's what is the patriarchy for people who might think we're making this up or think it doesn't exist? Anita, could you explain what the patriarchy is?
Sure. Well, I think patriarchy does not exist all by itself. I think patriarchy is part of that whole picture of colonialism and imperialistic power. It is a structure created to keep women in our place and to delineate between men's power and women's power. And I think that many of us, we are all attacking the patriarchy, and the patriarchy that tells us that there are certain roles that we are not equipped to play, and we all suffer for it. Not just women, men suffer from it as well. But as we push back on that patriarchy, I have to say that I think that it is insidious. It is almost invisible sometimes. There are glaring ways in which patriarchy manifests, but there are also mundane, almost invisible ways in which it manifests, which are probably far more pernicious because they're harder to attack. For instance, I would share, I'm a Latina. I was raised in deep poverty in Ohio. I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio. And I would share that my mother and father were migrant farm workers. They came from Texas. My parents were also born in this country. Nonetheless, we were deeply impoverished until I was 7 years old. I lived in a house that had no plumbing or electricity. And in that environment, in that culture, that there was a lot of macho culture. And I have first cousins who were not allowed to go to college, who were not allowed to do anything other than marry and bear children. And their lives were changed because of that. And I feel very fortunate that everyone in my family, I have 6 sisters and a brother, and we all went to college. And I think that when you see patriarchy in that way, where it is very apparent, where a culture is telling you women may not achieve an education, women are not fit to be educated, women are not fit to play some particular roles, it's easy to recognize it, and it's easy to be angry and fight back. And maybe we don't see so much of that anymore, but that patriarchy is still underlying in structures that render us invisible, that render us powerless, that ignore us, that do not speak to our needs, and that, as I said, not just women suffer from it. So I will move on and let the other speakers address this question as well.
Jan, what is the patriarchy and how has it affected women? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
You're fine.
I always find this question hard. Like, there's technical answers to this, right? But people who don't know the answer to it aren't going to be interested in the technical answers. They're going to be interested in, I think, what Anita was talking about what it means for their lives. Like, is this a real thing? Is it like, do teachers tend to respond to or listen to male voices in a classroom, and typically assertive or aggressive behaviors more than they do girls? And are we conditioned through feedback from a young age to behave in certain ways that are more likely to put us in one of those camps? Like, it's that really, you know, are the images that we see of women in our magazines and in our media, is there a difference between the images that we see of men typically? When I look around, I see differences. And I struggle sometimes for myself in terms of working out and responding of when I'm going to, like, not conform to those images that I'm being told that I'm supposed to be, versus times where I want to embrace those differences and be like, aggression, that's not for me. Actually, I want to work in other ways. It's not because I'm a woman, it's just, and I don't want it to be because I'm a woman. But, you know, like, it's trying to work out all of those things. And then there's just the structural decisions of our laws that are formed to meet and keep our economy running, as an example, where, you know, all of the work in the home, well, at least in our country still, most of that work is done by women. And it's unpaid and unrecognized. And so there are some of those tangible things of patriarchy. But I also just want to quickly say that I think we need to be talking about the interaction between patriarchy and other forms of oppression, because actually, if we simplify it to pure gender, actually, I think we collude with other oppressive systems, and I say that as a white woman. So I think that may not be the same for a woman of color or a disabled woman or a trans woman. But I think, yeah, just wanted to say that.
Awesome, thank you. Erum, what is the patriarchy and how has it affected women?
In simple words, we can say that patriarchy is a system of relationships, beliefs, and values embedded in political, social, and economic system that structure gender inequality between men and women. And patriarchy reinforces structural violence against women by projecting discriminatory gender roles that often place limitations on how far they can go. excluding women from collective resources pave ways for male domination. Male domination means that a level of power superiority is instituted against women. Thank you.
All right, next question. How does violence affect women? Jan?
How does violence affect women?
Yeah.
So in many different ways, if I look at, and I've done quite a lot of work in our government around trying to set up systems to address gender-based violence, and it's something I've spent a lot of time on. So you can go from the simplest things in terms of the threat of violence restricting our movements, our ability to express ourselves. It can also mean that if it's violence within a relationship, we often see a dynamic of women or partners limiting your ability to work. So you become more dependent on them, they have more control. It can mean that also that they limit your connections with other people. So you become isolated and lonely and more in their control. So it leads to, and I don't want to make it out as if women become passive in that situation, because actually women are working incredibly hard in those situations to manage their own safety, and if they have children, the safety of their children. But it leads to poverty and physical and mental bruises, and quite often women live with the trauma and spend, can spend much of their lives, if they survive it, trying to unpack that trauma and restore their own sense of self out of the violence which has been taken away from them.
Erum, how does violence affect women?
You asked?
Sorry, how does violence affect women?
Okay, there are different violence in society, like very common, if I talk about Pakistan, we have domestic violence and physical violence as well. And females cannot, sometimes due to social barrier and family pressure, they cannot even speak of how they are facing domestic violence from husband and in-laws. And even Pakistan have good laws for women, but due to their pressure, they cannot speak up. And obviously, physical violence and some violence in society, like in a workplace, they face different violences. And because patriarchy system, our topic is, and I think gun violences are very rare in Pakistan, and we have honor killing. We have good law, but still we hear cases of honor killing, and female gets this type of violences in society and even from family as well.
Thank you. Anita, how does violence affect women?
Okay, well, and I know that the other speakers have touched on this a little bit, but and I don't remember the exact statistic, but women are still more likely to be murdered by the person who, an intimate partner or a family member, the person or the people who are supposed to love her. And that is very, very debilitating. That has a profound impact on a woman. And one other statistic I think that is related to that is that of people who have severe and persistent mental illness, of the women, almost 100% of them are the victims of sexual violence or some type of violence. So it cuts lives short. It changes the trajectory of lives. It prevents women from reaching their full potential. It becomes generational poverty because those children oftentimes there are children involved. Those children then are also victims because, you know, of their mother's situation. So I think this is something that happens all over the world. And the other thing that I think that we see is that when we have wars, women and children suffer greatly, and sexual violence in wars has become just a part of all the wars that are taking place on this planet today. So I think that that is a very sobering statistic that we look at when we consider the rates of domestic violence that are ongoing in every society. Over.
All right.
I just wanted to apologize. When we do these meetings, frequently we say over just to clarify that you're done, but I'll try not to do that.
Oh, no, you are fine. It is okay. I think this is going to be our last question because we're getting close to the end of the 30 minutes. What are some policies or caucuses in the Green Party that ensure women are able to have a voice in the party? Erum?
The Green believe that women have the right to equal respect, responsibilities, opportunity, and outcomes in society. Green Party ensures that women having the right to enjoy equality to men in all spheres of society and their human rights, experience, knowledge, work, and other contributions to society. To society should be recognized and valued equally to man, as well as the right to equal access and participation in decision-making processes in all areas of political, social, culture, and normal routine life. The Green parties ensure that women have the right to must be able to empower to participate in and lead the development and implementation of policies, programs, and services which affect them. And we believe in equality, and that's why it is example that I am the co-chairperson. We have male chairperson, and I am the co-chairperson. It is the example of myself.
Thank you so much. Anita, what are some policies or caucuses in the Green Party that ensure women are able to have a voice in the party?
Well, we practice gender balance, or we try to. We realize that we don't have that entirely, and we are a product of a patriarchal society. So I would say we do our best for some of these things, but feminism is one of our 10 key values. And we have a women's caucus, and in Ohio, for instance, we have co-chairs, a male and a female co-chair, and most of our states have that. And also in Ohio, of our 4 officers, 3 of them are women. And so although I wish we were perfect in this, I think that we have aspirations and structures that help us along quite a bit, including gender balance, our women's caucus, and feminism is one of our 10 key values.
Yeah, is there any way the Green Party can improve on that, on being more inclusive for women? Because you said there were aspirations and things we could do better. Could you about those?
Yes, there are things that we can do better, and I think that one of the start of that is better communication and listening to one another better. But you know, I would say that we have to understand that this will not happen overnight. We are products of societies that are quite tainted, and we are products of a political system that is very predatory. So I would just say that I think that our foundation is good, but it will be a process to get to where we desire to be.
Thank you so much. Jan, what are some policies or caucuses in the Green Party that ensure women are able to have a voice?
Sure. So we used to have co-leadership, one man, one woman. We've changed that now. So there's co-leadership in all levels of the party, with one position designated for a woman and the other for a person of any other gender, because we recognise not everybody sits in that binary. But we wanted to protect the place for women because of the, historical marginalisation of women's voices. So, and we have a women's network in the party. We have gendered speaking orders to try and share the time. The networks, we have a decision-making body in the party where people can say they want an issue to be worked on or discussed, and the networks send representatives to that as a kind of almost like a citizens assembly type model, really leaning into hearing from lived experience perspectives across the range of networks to be able to, I guess, heighten the ability for those perspectives to come into our decision making. And it's also where we recognise the importance of the founding document for our country is Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which was an agreement between the colonisers and the Indigenous people. It hasn't been honoured particularly well as the history of colonisation, but we have specific space for Indigenous voices. And I bring this into this conversation in particular because the societal structures for Māori, the Indigenous people in our country, were not patriarchal, where we, in the same way that the British brought colonisation, where there were very strong Māori women leaders, and we see that come through our Indigenous caucus as well. So we are trying to have a partnership within our processes that also helps deconstruct those patriarchal structures.
And is there any way?
Sorry, and one other thing I should have said is that 7 out of 10 of our parliamentarians are women.
That's awesome. And is there any way your Green Party could improve for women?
Absolutely, it's an ongoing process, and I think some of it's about the interaction between different groups of women. And ensuring that we're getting those diversity of voices and not recreating a power imbalance within that structure. Also, there was Australian Greens did a classic thing, which I think is useful for all of us, where they also had the gendered speaking roles. And then they thought, let's just as an experiment record and see how much time people are taking in their contributions, and found that while they were going 50-50, like in the strictly gendered way, that men were taking twice as much of the time. So it's actually doing those reflective practices to go, okay, this is our intent, is to remove these imbalances of power. How are we doing? Just checking in, I think, is one of the most valuable things, and reflecting on, well, what could we change? But also seeing it helps change it, I think.
Well, I think that's a very good idea. Erum, what are some areas that your Green Party of Pakistan could improve to allow women to be more involved, more heard?
Yes, we are trying. We have done already last year gender equity trainings in Pakistan. We try to involve more women, and we train them, and we wanted they reach executive level, executive position in party, and we created a women network group within party, and we are trying our best to involve women in politics. We are ensuring that they don't get. We have good policies. We are, as all Greens have harassment policies. So women can, they're a safe place, and politics is not bad as we think. So we are ensuring that it is a safe politics platform. You can involve, and you can reach executive level and positions.
Great, thank you so much. Once again, I am Mackenzie Lacey. I am the co-chair of the Young Greens. I was joined by Jan Logie, from the Green Party of New Zealand. She's a member of parliament. I was joined by Erum Saleem, who's from the Green Party Pakistan, and Anita Rios, founding member of the Ohio Green Party. I would like to say thank you to all of our panelists and everybody else. Have a great night. Be safe. Bye.
Bye.